Welcome, everybody. Chris Stegall here with MK Partners, joined today by Matt Kaufman. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
And we had a little bit of a plan today to chat about pricing and AppExchange app, but we were going to get started early with some surprise content because we just discovered something pretty cool on Trailhead, right, Matt?
Yeah. So we were talking about what we're going to talk about right now. And I was like, well, let me just do a search for AppExchange pricing and see what comes up. And sure enough, I did a search. And there are, hits on various blogs and things like that. But one of the top links was this here to Trailhead. So I clicked on it. And I found a Trailhead module that I hadn't even done yet, which is always exciting because I like to do Trailhead modules. And we can see that there's a module here called AppExchange Pricing Strategy for Partners. And there's 3 different parts of this module that we can work on. And this is exactly what we're going to talk about today. So it's very exciting for me that we could have a script right in front of us and we wouldn't have to wing it. And when we talk about AppExchange pricing, like we were planning on doing, there's different apps that are available on the AppExchange. Some of them are native apps that are going to be entirely contained inside Salesforce. And others are apps that exist outside of the Salesforce technology stack, but have components that you can install into your Salesforce, and then it'll talk to those outside things. Examples of that might be DocuSign, right? So you're not actually signing the document inside Salesforce. You can initiate the process from Salesforce, and then after you do the signatures in the real world or on your computer or your phone, you get the data back from their servers in your Salesforce. And so you have this streamlined process, but you are going out of Salesforce versus the native ones, which means that you're never leaving Salesforce and your data doesn't leave Salesforce either. And an example of that would be Mambo Merge, our app that does document generation. It's doing it natively, so the data doesn't go out of Salesforce to generate that document, and that lives inside Salesforce. And really, when you're looking at native apps, it really kind of runs a spectrum from small things that are just templates or little useful tools to these really robust applications that help you do a whole business process. And so pricing can be rather difficult. It's probably actually the hardest part about building an app. Obviously, a lot of work goes into the technical aspect and a lot of work goes into the marketing and sales, but getting that price right is really hard. And sometimes we've struggled with finding the right pricing model and the right price point to make an app profitable. In fact, one of the first apps that we ever published is Photo Uploader, and that was published I think over 10 years ago at this point, and it's free. And it's free because it's a small tool, a small little widget that you can use to add pictures to records. And it's so small that we had a hard time figuring out, well, who's going to pay for this, and how much are they willing to pay, and is it even enough to, justify the cost? That's because every time you have an app on the AppExchange, you have your costs as a business. So you have your development costs, your support costs, marketing, payroll, maybe rent for an office space if you still have an office, benefits, all that stuff. You also maybe have some costs for receiving the payment. So that could be a credit card charge or ACH, or someone to deposit the checks. And you also have to then pay a percentage to Salesforce for being on the AppExchange. So they get a cut of everything. And so that the cost of even just making the sale keeps going up to the point where sometimes it's going to be hard to find a customer who's willing to pay for it. And so when it came to Photo Uploader, we actually gave it away, and we continue to give it away today. So this is a really complex topic, and we probably could talk about it for a long time. And there's not necessarily a right or a wrong, but this Trailhead module covers everything you need to know. I was really impressed when we happened to just find it right before talking. And it basically kind of walks you through this process of trying to determine, can you make money off of this app, and who's willing to pay for it? And unfortunately, you might find that you can't always make money off of an app. A great idea does not mean that it's an idea that you can make money off of, or at least not make a whole business off of. You might be able to make some money as a one-person shop offering an app, but that's not necessarily a business that's going to grow and then get acquired for millions of dollars. And so you got to keep that in mind. So here you can see one of the first 4 questions that they talk about is what am I solving and who am I solving for? I think those are really important. As consultants, we often come up with tools that help us. We're like, oh, I came up with this great app. It allows me to create fields. Years ago, we created an app called Admin Garage. And we only used it internally. We never even released it publicly. But what it did, it let you create fields 100 at a time. You take a spreadsheet, click save, and it would go ahead and create 100 fields on that object. And now that's built into Salesforce years later. But we never even tried to sell it because when we thought about it, we were solving this problem that only admins have, maybe developers too, but it's not your average end user that has the problem. And if you look at who uses Salesforce, where the majority of people who are using Salesforce are not admins or developers, they're the end users. And so they wouldn't be using this tool. And so, how much can we really charge for that? Do you create new objects and new fields every day in bulk? Not really. Consultants might, but the average admin doesn't. And so when we try to figure out what the cost for us was to sell this app and support the app and market it and all that stuff and pay for all those expenses, no one was going to pay for it. It just wasn't worth it. So we just kept it in-house. And I always wonder how many things are out there right now, apps that are built but not published. We built Admin Garage years ago. I don't even remember how many years ago it was at this point. Over 7. And in fact, it's almost 10. Now I think about it. The last 3 years have gone by quickly. And so open source software wasn't as popular then. I think now a lot of things are being built and they're being published as open source software. And so, it skips this entire conversation. That's probably a whole other conversation that we can have is, how do you create open source software and get stuff out in the world for people to use, but then also run a business off of that in an ethical way too. That's a totally different conversation we can have. So when it comes to pricing, you got to think about who the audience is. And really, this is something you should do probably before you even build the app.
Yeah. And probably something like this is also a conversation that you'll have regularly, at least once a year, probably once you have developed an app, because things on the AppExchange and like how the partner program works are going to change. Your audience is going to change. Salesforce will have rolled out new features that may step into some overlap with what your app does or make what your app does more relevant because features have been deprecated. And so it's sort of a constant conversation.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, the world changes around us, right? So you could imagine someone probably built apps for little kiosks. When you walk into an office, you go up to the kiosk and you say, "Oh, I'm here. And I'm here to meet Chris." We don't need those apps anymore. People aren't going into the office, right? So not only does the technology change, but the world around it does too, to the point where the app may not be needed, or you have to price it in such a way that it'll still get used, or you adapt the app for a different purpose. That's possible too.
There's probably apps to track key fob scans and activate and deactivate key fobs with one of those systems. And you were starting to say that how many apps exist that haven't been published because, describing Admin Garage, it's like, it would be relevant to other consultants, but firms also have their own developers and probably have their own internal tool that does the exact same thing. And it'd be interesting to see the features and functionality of all of those private tools and see like who does it best and what could we add?
I know all the big consulting firms have their own suite of tools internally, and they also have these code libraries that they'll install on all their customers just to make development faster. So like a utils class and things like that, data factories for test data. But they're all separate. Everyone creates their own instead of us all leveraging best practices. And not only that, if we all leveraged an open source library, let's just say, then each of those firms won't have to spend so much money and time each year maintaining their internal code base. We could actually all just contribute a little. But it's hard to get companies to collaborate like that in public. They really like to have their secret sauce that they know makes them faster. But if everybody has their own secret sauce and essentially they're all the same, we know what the ingredients are. It's not really a secret anymore. So this module goes on to talk about doing some analysis. And I think this is important, like I was saying, before you really start to build the app, to figure out, is this not just a great idea, but is this a viable product that we can sell and make money off of and maintain over time? There's been a lot of apps that have been published and then weren't maintained, and AppExchange Salesforce will cull those from the AppExchange over time. If you're not maintaining your app, they'll take them away. They'll warn the publisher first, obviously, but they don't want these apps to be out there with pictures of the old classic UI, or things that don't support Lightning at all, things that haven't had a release in years. They don't really want that. They want it to be maintained and make sure that it's up to date and secure and using the best standards. And so you have to be in it for the long haul. If you're just have an idea that you want the world to have, then doing some type of open source repo is probably a better idea, where you can just share it with everybody else. And maybe one of those people will want to take ownership when you're kind of moved on. So it talks about figuring out, how valuable it is to people, and who the customers are, both current and new. Are there any competitors in the space is another good one too. If you look at the AppExchange, you got over 1,000 listings there. Does it even make sense? Do we need another app to do something if there's already a bunch out there? I think as developers and as entrepreneurs, we often think that the way we're going to do it is better, and not often is better, right? If we're building something today, we're probably using newer technology than something that was built years ago. We released Mama Merge only a couple of years ago, but there's been a lot of competitors out for a decade. But we built ours 100% Lightning web components, and so it's very different technology. And so I thought it was worthwhile to do. But if you're just changing a couple fields on a screen and that's your kind of special sauce, I don't know if it's even worth it. It's hard to say. And so you got to really figure that out ahead of time, like I said, before you do the investment of building it and packaging it and passing the security review and publishing it and all that stuff. And there is a cost now for security reviews. There's always been some cost, but now it's per security review. So you really have to kind of commit to growing this as a product, as a company, as opposed to just an app with an idea. So they talk about interviewing existing customers and searching for new customers. And really, this is all talking about doing market research. So an idea that a developer or an entrepreneur has is great, but until you do that research to figure out, is this something that people need and how much people are willing to spend, you could be spending a lot of time and money building something that, like I said, you can't even sell, like Admin Garage. And we've had probably a bunch over the years of these little tools. They're super useful. They're great functionality, but where is the right price point? In fact, maybe what we should do now is open up a sheet and we can start to do some math. So let me go ahead and just open a new Google Sheet using sheets.new in my browser.
That's one of my favorite shortcuts.
One of mine too.
Docs.new, sheets.new, slides.new.
All right. So we'll just start doing some math. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in a little just to make this easier on the eyes for everybody. Let's do that. And most things that we sell that are Salesforce related tend to be on annual contracts. It doesn't have to be that, but it tends to be. And we usually think of it in terms of pricing of per user per month, but that's not the only model. But let's just do some hypotheticals here. So let's just say number of users, and we'll do number of months, but it's always going to be 12 for now. And then we'll say dollar per user per month, and then we'll say total. Okay. And so the idea here is let's pretend that we have an app like Photo Uploader, right? So Photo Uploader, again, it's one of our oldest apps. And all it does is it lets you add photos or images to records. And if you're watching this at home and you're really familiar with Salesforce, you might say, well, can't I already do that with a rich text field? And the answer is the app was built before rich text fields. So at the time you couldn't. The other answer is yes, you can, but sometimes you don't want to hit the edit button. you want to use a little component on the side and maybe control when that component shows up and things like that. So there is a use case for it still, and we have a surprisingly large number of installs every month for Photo Uploader. So don't knock it till you've tried it. It's a great little component, but the key word there is that it's little, and we're really not like doing anything that you couldn't already do in Salesforce. We're just making it a little easier. And so how much can we really charge for this? You know, just to see the picture of my face when you're looking at my contact record, or lead or account, whatever. You can't charge too much. We're not talking about $150 a user a month, like the cost of Salesforce. We're talking about, you know, the smallest amount of possible. It's just like, you know, okay, let's say $1. So let's say we're gonna say 12 months because that's what they all are. Let's just say it's $1 per user per month. Now, if we get a big customer, we got a big customer who has 500 users, let's say. Okay, so what's the math on that? So we're gonna say 500 users times 12 months times $1. That's $6,000 a year, and that's not bad. But depending where you live in the world, maybe that's enough for you for 1 year. But I think that a lot of us would not be able to live off of that $6,000. And that's before any costs, right? So we're going to subtract, let's say $1,000 just for the security fee. You got to get a website, you got to get some marketing, you got to do email, you got to use customer service, which could take a lot of time. You got to spend time doing sales and trying to reach out to people. So that $6,000 quickly vanishes, right? And that's if it's 500 users. The reality is most of our installs are going to be from the 70% of Salesforce customers that are smaller than that, right? Most of their customers are going to be small and medium-sized businesses because just doing the math, the majority of businesses are small and medium-sized businesses. And so you're going to get more installs from small and medium-sized businesses. So now let's imagine that we get a 10-user org. Maybe it's a nonprofit. And we're going to do that same dollar, and we'll do the math. Okay, and that's $120 a year. So we lost money on that one. You have to get a lot of those. And you start to see that, you know, you need a lot of users when your price is $1. Obviously, $1 is really appealing. Like, who's not going to pay $1? Sure, of course, I'll pay $1 per user. But your business is going to be losing money with every install. And so now we can start to extrapolate some stuff, you know, whether it's, you know, $2 or $10, whatever it may be. Let's do $10 here, and let's go to 500. So now we're starting to get to the point where you might be able to make a living off of this, right? So $60,000 a year. In some places, that's a good salary. In other places, it may not be. But that's just, you know, from one large customer, or maybe from 500 user customers like that. You might be able to get there. But the problem is $10 for just the ability to put a picture on the screen, and paying $60,000 a year. Someone at that prospect or customer is going to realize, well, wait a minute, I can just put a rich text field on the screen myself, and I just saved us $60,000. And so you're not going to be able to keep that customer, even if you could win them to begin with. And so now you're saying, okay, well, I got to build a much more complex app. Then I need to provide more functionality. And of course, if you're providing more functionality, that means more development work, more QA, more customer service. And so then the costs go up again. And so now you have maybe 3 workers working for you to maintain and build this app and do all that stuff. Well, that $60,000 now doesn't cover it. And so you have this tug of war where you're not able to really make a profitable app, especially at the beginning. And I recently had a conversation with a successful entrepreneur who sold multiple companies that they had started with AppExchange apps. And he said it takes 7 years when you start a new app from scratch with no existing client base to the point where you're really profitable and running as a business, and, you know, could even sell it to a larger company. 7 years. So you can imagine that's how long it's going to take for that balance to work out. And so if you go through all of this with that in mind, and maybe you can accelerate it to 5 years or even 4 years if you have an amazing idea and you're very familiar with the Salesforce technology stack and things like that. That's still a long time to be operating at a loss. And so, you know, that's the kind of thing that you really need to figure out. It almost makes more sense just to publish it as open source and get it out there and maybe get other people to start contributing to it for free. And then once it gets to a point, maybe you can figure out a way to if you have the right licensing, to turn it into a paid app.
And on the AppExchange, do you have flexibility in terms of the licensing structure? Does it have to be charged per user, or could we do per times that it's used in your org on a page layout, or a flat rate for an org wide, as many users as you want, as few users as you want?
Yeah, let me see if I can find it. So this module actually goes over that too, which is really great point. So I've been talking about charging per user. And if we can find it, I might be able to. Here we go. So there's a couple different other ways that you can charge. So paid app is what we've been talking about. Freemium is another great model too. So in a freemium app, it's free to use in some basic form. And actually, this is what we did for Mama Merge. So some of the first prospects that we talked to, we were pricing the app low, and they would come in and they'd say, and maybe because it was so low, they would say this actually. They would say, I can't believe this isn't already built into Salesforce, right? And so if you think about going back to the photo uploader idea, if we were to charge $1 a month, people say, only $1, what are you doing? Oh, it's just a picture. Well, why isn't that already built in? And they almost get mad at you that you're taking advantage of them. Like you found this gap and you built a tool and you're forcing them to pay for it. And that was a lot of the feedback we were getting at the beginning. Because our pricing was low. People said, I can't believe this is not included. So what we decided is, okay, well, you know what? Hey, you can have it for free then. If you think it should be included, take it. We just wanted them to install it and start giving us feedback and find the value, because really they don't know the value until they start using it. So that freemium model is great, where we published the app, it was free, and then built into the AppExchange framework, there's the ability to basically turn on features and turn off features for your customers that pay. And so that's what we did. We created different tiers of the app. This is still all on a per user basis. However, there are some apps, and I think if we scroll down, here we go. There are some apps that don't charge per user. So we use the manage licenses feature. When you install an app in Salesforce, you can go to setup and then install packages. And then if that app is a per user app, you can manage which users have a license. So I can say, Chris, you're allowed to use Mama Merge, but Matt, you're not. And you go through each user and you can decide either using a permission set or using this manage license functionality to decide how many people have it. And you're only allowed to use up to what you've paid for, right? So if we have paid for 10 licenses, I can give those licenses to 10 users at any given one time. But another way to try to price your app is at the org level. And when we were looking at Admin Garage, that was how we were thinking it. Because when you think about Admin Garage, it really was for administrators, and most customers don't have a lot of administrators. So pricing it at the org level might be better. But then you're going to have to charge a lot. And so if we come back here, and if we think this is the user model, right? If it's an org model, well, it's always going to be one, right? Because it's just one org. And then 12 months, and then the dollar per org is really what it is. So let's see if we can just kind of model this out. And the months one at this point is kind of silly, but I still like to put it there. And then total. So there's always only one org, but then you charge a lot for the org. So you might charge like $5,000 a year, right? Or a year, I said. So that should be less than that. Let's see if I can figure this out. Let's just do it that way. Let's just say $499 or yeah, $499. Let's see if I can get it. There we go. So it's a little under 6,000 a year, let's just say. So here now, you don't care how many users they have. You got one user, you got 1,000 users, you're charging the same. And that's okay, but that one user company is going to call you up a lot, probably, because they need a lot of help. And maybe the 1,000 user doesn't have to call you up because they have internal folks that are good. And so in a way, you're penalizing some customers and not others. And depending on the app, maybe it's the opposite issue. If it's an app that's used by every user and the customer is a huge customer, let's say it's like 50,000 users. Well, now they're getting a steal, right? So the 100 or the 500 user customer they're paying a reasonable amount, but that customer that's huge, Salesforce's largest customers, they're getting a steal and you're missing out on money. So the pricing on a per org model is really tricky to figure out, especially if it's used by end users. If it's just used by admins, then that's a good fit, because there's only so many admins at a customer, but it's still very hard to figure out, and so you got to take that into account. The other way that you can price it is per use, but you have to figure out a way technologically to track that, which, by the way, is not hard to do. We do that in MomMerge. We keep track of every time that a customer does a merge. We don't know what they're merging, but we know how many documents we've generated, and we're proud of that number. And so we could charge per use. And there are some apps out there that charge per use. So every time you click the button, you get charged 10 cents. We got your credit card or bank account on file. And every month, we're just going to say, okay, we're charging you. And so you could do that too. So number of uses. Months doesn't really matter at that point. And then, it's just dollars per use. Let's go ahead and mock that up too. We'll just do one there. Okay, so if it's 10 cents per use, let's say, right? And I'm going to turn this into dollars just to make this a little easier. Okay, so, and we'll do this too. Dollars. So let's say they use it 100 times. Well, you made $10, right? That's not too good. So they really have to use it a lot. And so we're back in this situation where our small customers, the 2-person org, 10-person org, they're not going to use it that much. You're really not making any money off of them. You're losing money off of them. On the biggest orgs, though, that are using it, like 100,000 times, there you're making some money, but that's still not enough to really, run a business off of. So 10 cents is too low. And then you start, so okay, we got to make it higher, right? So let's say it's $1. Okay, well, now we're making some real money. But when you start to get to $1 or even higher, I've seen apps that help with like the facilitation of home loans and things like that, and they'll charge like $1,000 per loan, right? And so if you think about charging $1,000 per loan, and let's say the company does 1,000 loans a year, right? Well, that's amazing money, but that's also so much that the company, we're back to where we were up here with the 60,000. The company is going to say, well, wait a minute. Why are we spending $1 million on this app? Let's go hire a development team in-house just to build it ourselves. And so it's very hard to find that sweet spot where what you're providing is valuable enough that the customer will continue to pay that amount every year, but not so inexpensive that you don't make a living. And like I said, there is no right answer. It really comes down to what it is you're providing. If you have some magical algorithm or secret sauce that no one else has, you obviously can charge more. But if you just have a template of objects and fields and page layouts and even flows in Salesforce, well, that can all be rebuilt by someone who's seen it before. And if your price point is too high, they're going to go ahead and rebuild it.
Yeah. And you probably have to ask yourself why you built it in the first place. Obviously, if you're starting from scratch and looking for a need and you're going to build towards that need with the objective of having an app. But like you were saying, in our case, where a lot of apps start as internal or encountering something that you used to be able to do and you can no longer do, when you're doing that market research and seeing what exists currently on the AppExchange, and then to decide not to spend that money, was it because you said, oh, for $10, I could build this myself, in which case, your pricing has to be below what exists. But if you did it because none of those solutions met the exact need and we're going to add that little special something, then like you said, now you can start thinking about pricing beyond where they are because they weren't justified to you, but now it is.
Yeah, I think we've had enough experience with creating a great idea that ends up being a failure of a product. And the two really are two different things. So a great idea is not necessarily a successful product. It takes a lot of time and energy into marketing and selling that product to make it to something that is profitable and worth continuing for years to come. And so when it came to publishing MomMerge specifically, it wasn't that we sat down one day and said, hey, what app can we build that would be a good product? We had already built it 5 times and had customers that had asked us to build it for them. So we knew there was a need for it. It wasn't something that we sat down and tried to start from scratch. And I think that's really the key. Yes, you can go out and do the market research and try to figure it out, but it's a lot easier for consulting firms, really, to say, hey, what are the problems that we've solved repeatedly over and over? And we know how much it cost us to solve that problem. And we know the issues that we were solving and how much it was worth to the customers. And then say, okay, well, now that we built it and we know all this information, yes, it is worth publishing because there's a market for it, or no, there's not. Versus we had a great idea, nobody actually needed it, but it sounded really cool. So we went and we built it and we published it quickly, and then it just sits on the AppExchange. And so if in a way, if there's no one else already in that space, then maybe it's not a good product because no one's going to be looking for it anyway. But if there's at least one product in that space that maybe looks like it's getting some traction, you might be able to catch up with it. So there's a sweet spot there, whether that the space is saturated or not, and if there's any issues or negative feedback about the competitors online. But yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. Is that it's not enough to just build an app and publish it. You have to commit to marketing it and having sales resources and things like that. Otherwise, it's just going to sit there. Unlike our phones and the app stores on our phones, you don't have billions of people going to the AppExchange every day to download something that they're going to personally use. In fact, they can't install it, right? So the only people who can install something from the AppExchange are a Salesforce administrator or someone with a Salesforce administrator profile. And so you're very limited on who people can browse, but they're not going to be able to install it in their work org. They might be able to install it in their Trailhead playgrounds or some type of developer org, but that's not a paying customer. The paying customers are a much more limited subset of the population. So you got to make sure that those Salesforce administrators out there will hear about your app, be enticed to install it, and go and install it.
Yeah, and it's probably a conversation for a different one of these sessions in terms of like the marketing, but that does raise its own sort of conundrum of, do I market to users the same way that ads for medicine says, ask your doctor about this, ask your admin about this, and here's how it's going to save you? Or do you market directly to the admins the same way, most products
and it probably depends on the nature of the app too, right? And whether it's a fully native app versus something that's off platform and it's hybrid, that type of thing. So there's a lot of factors to think about. Like I said, this module seems really great. It does talk about a lot of this stuff. Even talking about, okay, well, who are you selling to? Like we've been talking about. And yeah, if you're building an app that is, let's say, used on your phone. So an example might be Salesforce has that tool, Salesforce Inbox, which is an app that you install on your phone, and it will synchronize your contacts and your emails and your calendar with Salesforce and let you add your emails to Salesforce and things like that. I don't know if it's still the case today, but when that first came out, anyone could install it on their phone and say, yeah, I want to try this out. Then that's not going to be the case for apps that most publishers build, because you're going to need to have a connected app installed on the org. But Salesforce obviously could do that. I mean, so anyone could get basically a free, I think it was a 30-day trial, a 25-day trial, to just try out that app. And so that's really selling to an individual. And in that case, yeah, if you have an app like that, maybe it's a Chrome extension or something where you don't need to authenticate into Salesforce, but it like somehow provides additional functionality when you're in Salesforce. That's the kind of thing where, yeah, it does make sense to mass market on social media and websites and search and things like that. But if you're really oriented towards, Salesforce administrators at large enterprises, I don't know if there's any value to being on everybody's Facebook page or Twitter feed or anything like that. You might get some brand recognition out of it, but you could also get brand recognition with a Super Bowl ad, right? And it's like, well, that's still very expensive advertising. And so it does make it a lot harder to try to get eyes on the product and then, those people to install. And so as part of the publishing process, you actually have to provide a lot of these details. So, in a way, Salesforce makes it hard to publish. It's not that it's impossible, but they want you to submit a business plan and have like a pricing model, and whether you're going to be charging per user or per org, all that stuff has to be figured out ahead of time. And that prevents you from kind of going down this path. You can also talk to folks there too, and try to get some best practices and some knowledge out of them. And that'll, kind of lead you to the right area, hopefully, assuming that there is a right area for how to sell it. There's also a couple different apps that they provide. So I mentioned already that you can control licensing and turn on features and stuff like that. But there's also an app to submit the orders to Salesforce. So I'd say that Salesforce takes a % of every sale. That's if you're using the channel order app, which basically means that you're going to submit a list every month. Okay, here are the orders we got. And then they'll send an invoice to you and you pay that. You can also use checkout, which is integrated with AppExchange. So people are actually buying your app from the AppExchange, and then it's the opposite. You get your money after Stripe has done the payment. You can do that too. And there's another model. These are the ways of collecting the money, but there's another model that we didn't discuss that I just thought of. It doesn't work with checkout. It does work with a channel order. So channel order is where you have to tell Salesforce, hey, here's what I sold. And this only works sometimes. So one of the models that I've sometimes seen is not a per user in the sense that we're going to, you bought 10, so you only get 10. But it's actually an unlimited license agreement for the number that we've agreed upon in advance. And so the way this works is we're a growing company. And I don't know how many users we're going to have on any given day, but I don't want to have to fill out a new form every day to buy more licenses. It's kind of a pain. So I'm going to tell you in advance, I think that right now, today, we have 100 users, but at the end of the year, we'll probably have an average of 120 over the course of the year. So I'm going to sign a contract today for 120 users. And at the end of the year, we'll true up. So if I were to look at my licensing, it actually says I have unlimited licensing. If I were to log into my org and look, and I don't have to worry about managing licensing and figuring out who can use it and who can't, and taking stuff away because it's rush job today or whatever. Maybe someone's out of the office. Anyone in my org will be able to use the app, and then somehow either through giving access to my vendor or just on the honor system because we're signing contracts. At the end of the year, if it turns out, oh, we actually grew a lot more this year, we ended up having 150, I will pay more. Or we didn't grow that much, we only had 110, I'll pay less. I mean, that's another way to do it too. And for that one, you definitely have to use the channel order app because the number of users is not something that's actually tracked on a daily basis. And it's not something that's being controlled. It's really just a contractual number. And that's another way to do it too. You still run into the same issues though that we had up here of the cost per user. But at least you're not having to deal with as many order forms throughout the year. And so then maybe that reduces your cost a little. You're not charging the same credit card 5 times through the year, that type of thing. So you save a little here or there. But that's another option too. I'm just going to jump back up to this last part of the module here, where it talks about the contractual stuff. So this is where it talks about basically the channel order app and how you submit that. And you can see here it says typically the royalty back to Salesforce is 15% of your app's revenue. And so if you are charging for your app, then you're paying 15% of that. So if your license price is $1, for every dollar you sell, 15 cents is going to Salesforce. And then also credit card fees, so maybe three cents there. And then you have marketing, sales, customer service, all that stuff, development. And so you can quickly see that dollar goes away, and you need to charge more than $1. So that's a big factor to think of when you build for the AppExchange versus other platforms.
The table on that page is a little bit, it's not deceptive, but to have your annual payment and then the monthly payment to Salesforce, I was like, wow, that looks really low for 15%, $225
Yeah, you got to multiply by 12. Yeah. You're charged monthly. So we get an invoice every month from Salesforce, and then we have to pay that invoice every month. I will say, shout out, pro tip here. If you are publishing an app, and you have a lot of customers, you can request to have consolidated billing, which means instead of getting an invoice per customer per month, which is the standard, you'll get one invoice for all of your customers. Obviously, there's pros and cons to doing it that way, but it's a lot easier to send one amount of money to Salesforce every month than to have to send 100. And so you at least, again, reduce the labor involved with doing the sale and the order. So I would recommend that. And then it talks about, well, okay, what if you have other types of pricing? So often you'll see, okay, we're going to charge for licensing, but there's also Premier support. We're going to charge for licensing, then there's an implementation cost. Or there's a base app and then add-on apps and things like that. And so there are different model contracts you can see here, but these are all contracts that you have to work out with Salesforce. And it even says you have to talk to an AppExchange rep to figure that out. So if it's based on data consumed or number of times of clicks and things like that, those are all things that they can help you with if that's a better fit for your app. But you got to talk to them about it. It's not something that we can really get into too much here. So that's this module. Like I said, we didn't plan to talk about it, but I really liked it, and I haven't done it yet, so I'll be doing it later. I wanted to go through it slowly, not just on the call. But I think it's a great way to learn about all the different factors to consider before you even build an app. It's nice to build an app. It's fun. It's great. It's a great sense of accomplishment. And I love using the tools that we build, but not all of our apps end up becoming products.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point and good to keep in mind when developing, because I think they got at the heart of another one of the reasons that somebody might build an app is not because current offerings don't do it or because the current offerings are more expensive, but it's because I want to solve this problem. I'm going to have fun figuring out how they made theirs, and I won't have to spend any money to do it. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have a product that someone else will want to buy. If you were the fun was the problem solving, and you can't charge people for that. So
yeah, and one of the first things I do whenever we encounter a problem is I usually search, right? That's like I did for this Trailhead module. I search, and I'll search and I'll find GitHub repos. I'll find NPM libraries. I'll find stuff on the AppExchange. And there's nothing more disappointing than finding the solution, but seeing that it was abandoned a long time ago.
Yeah.
And so you really almost have like a duty to society that if you're going to create an app, you have to maintain it or publish it in such a way that it can be maintained by others.
Yeah.
And that would be like open source software with the right licensing. Because there are so many times where I find something like, if only they had finished this project, if only, they had just made it so that I could contribute, then I could use this and continue it on. And maybe that person would have actually come back and maintained it more if other people had joined in to solve this problem. But when you publish half of a solution and it's in a managed app on the AppExchange, then all that code is hidden and no one else can contribute to it. It's important to take all this into consideration ahead of time. And then I really wish that part of the decision tree that's kind of provided in here would even say, if you don't think you're going to be able to publish this app and make a living off of it or be profitable, hey, here's the alternative. Look at the following GitHub repos that Salesforce has published or some of the partners have published, where we give away the idea because we couldn't make money off of it. And it's not just partners that do it. It's not just individual admins. It's like Salesforce has things that they give away too on GitHub repos and things like that are open source software because, it's like really useful, great tools, just can't make money off of it.
Yeah, there's also several Salesforce Labs apps on the AppExchange that live somewhere between. Right. We didn't want to build this in as functionality, but we can't charge you for not including it as functionality. So, yeah.
And a lot of those apps, the Labs ones especially, they exist in two forms. So they'll exist as an app that you can install, but the code is also out there for people to contribute or add to. And so that way, if the employee who originally built it does end up leaving the company or has other duties, the community can't contribute. I think a good analogy that hopefully everyone can relate to is food, right? You can have a great recipe. Let's say you know how to make amazing cakes, right? That doesn't mean you should necessarily open up a bakery as your business and try to sell those cakes. So if you have an amazing recipe for a chocolate cake, a tuxedo cake, one of my favorites, chocolate tuxedo cake. Yeah, I don't think you could start a business just selling chocolate tuxedo cakes. That would have to be a really amazing cake to have a bakery that just does that and somehow ships it across the world. I know there are some cheesecake stores, bakeries that sell cheesecakes, and you order them and they come in the mail in a big box with ice, dry ice. Yeah, I know there are some that do exist, but you're probably better off taking that recipe and just publishing it online for free so other people can make your cake, or make videos about you making the cake.
Yeah.
Not going and creating a bakery that just sells your one amazing tuxedo cake. It's not going to work out.
Yeah. And there's likely something besides the quality that would make it successful, because you think about how often, I don't want to name products in case I offend somebody, but you think about how frequently homemade goods are appreciated more than something that's an internationally shipped brand. And it's
Right.
like, surely if I can make this better than them, but you can't, because the secret is
Right.
the logistics management or
Yes.
franchising or
Yeah.
something
And the
beyond
marketing
the
and all
taste.
that
Yeah.
stuff. Right. Yeah. And with cake is very specific, but yes, if it takes a week for my cake to get to you, guess what? You're not eating that cake, and you're not going to order another one. So there's a lot more behind it, like an app versus a business, or an idea versus even, a successful app is two different things. And so this is the type of stuff that you have to think about. And I'll throw it out there. If anyone watches this video and they want to talk about it, I enjoy talking about this and exploring the idea and trying to figure out, is this a viable idea that could turn into a profitable app? So you can always reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find us on the AppExchange as well,
Yeah,
MK
that's right.
Partners and Mambo Merge, and reach out right there or on the website. I will throw a link as well to this module in the description of the video here, if folks want to try it themselves. Thank you, Matt, for talking us through the pricing strategy of an AppExchange app and sort of the personal experience and philosophical view of what goes into it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And thank you, everybody, for watching. We will see you next time. Bye. Cool.
Let me end recording.